Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's 1 million by 1 million online rendezvous. We are live right now on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. This is Sramana, Mitra, founder and CEO of 1 million by 1 million, the first and only global virtual accelerator in the world for technology startups. I am here with another episode, probably the second last episode of 2020. We have been with you here most weeks through this very difficult year. We are going to, as usual, do some very interesting content. Let me, however, first start you off by saying, if you are looking for feedback on your project, on your startup project, whether you've started already or you're thinking about an idea that you're planning to execute on and you want my feedback, the place to get that would be our free mentoring roundtables. If you go to 1mby1m.com, go to free public roundtables, that's where you'll have the schedule. You can register and book your slot to come talk to me. Those are safe working sessions, and I'll be delighted to work with you there. Today, we are going to address a topic that has been coming up a lot in our various conversations, is the topic of startup ideas and startup sectors. And today we're going to spotlight EdTech, online education, educational technology, EdTech platforms, etc. And to do that, I've invited a very good friend of mine, Betsy Corcoran, who was my editor at Forbes when I used to write a column on Forbes in the late 2000s through the financial crisis. And Betsy was at that time the technology editor of Forbes, so that's when we got to know each other. Later on, she went on to found EdSurge, which is kind of the TechCrunch of education. So anyway, we are going to learn about EdTech from Betsy, and then we're going to talk about one of my startup ideas in the EdTech space with Betsy, and that's going to be the primary content for today's session. So welcome. I hope you enjoy the session today, and let's get going.
Great. So, folks, what we're going to do next, Betsy and I are going to work on quickly for a few minutes on an idea. One of the things we've been hearing throughout these last few months, at the beginning of COVID, everybody was shocked and nobody was thinking about anything other than fear. And then we very quickly, actually, remarkably quickly, the industry settled down to a new normal of working from home and kind of managing to do all the things that we did before online, because we are this heavily privileged segment that can work from home and pretty much be productive from home, and we all have very comfortable, spaces to work from. We're not the people who are facing the trauma of being squeezed in very small spaces. So very soon, I also started seeing a lot of questions about new startups. People were taking the time that they had in their hands to start thinking about new startups. And we ran a poll and asked, what kinds of content do you want, what kind of topics do you want us to discuss in our rendezvous and so forth. And the overwhelming poll winner was startup ideas. So I published a bunch of startup ideas, post-COVID startup ideas. Post-COVID is a discontinuity, right? It's one of the biggest discontinuities we've ever faced. And as a result, trends are opening up, new opportunities are going to open up. So I started writing my own thoughts about startup ideas, and here's one, startup ideas for the post-COVID world, K-12 education. Betsy has hinted at some of these issues. I'll read you my thoughts, and then we will brainstorm a little bit about it, and I'll ask Betsy to weigh in on what her observations are. So in the spring of 2020, parents of young children have suddenly woken up to a world where kids have to be homeschooled. They're supposedly guided by teachers. These teachers have no experience of teaching online and are thus learners themselves of a new education paradigm. They're scrambling to make things flow without losing the limited attention of the youngsters that are already difficult to command in normal times. The key issue I observe is that the teaching tools are not designed for this usage model. The education world has made a shift in the last decade from a sage-on-stage model to a guide-on-side model. In the former, teachers lectured to students in an auditorium format. In the latter, kids were assigned YouTube or Khan Academy videos as homework, and they did exercises in class with the teacher assisting as needed. Now we're making another giant paradigm shift in an accelerated pace. Kids are at home. Teachers are at home. Parents are at home. The learning is happening at home, and the teacher is a virtual presence. As in most paradigm shifts, the best way to consider them is by looking at the opportunities they present. Throughout the COVID quarantine, I have preserved a daily routine of studying French on Duolingo. There's much that I've observed in their approach that can be applied to other types of subjects at various levels. For K through 12, the most interesting of these is gamification. Children tend to hang out in groups. One of the key success factors of K through 12 gamification could be to tap into this natural tendency and turn these organic affinities into study groups with built-in gamification. Let us think through a use case. Say a group of 6 kids are fast friends in a particular class. The most natural study group to form would be to let this group come together. In Algebra 1, the strongest of the group is tasked with tutoring the weakest, and the other 4 average ones simply collaborate. In a class of 30, there could be 5 such groups, competing with one another in a tournament style. Math tournaments have been known to be great fun. What if there's an app that is equipped to provide all of the above functionalities? Peer tutoring, peer collaboration, team prep, class tournament. The other opportunity in this new paradigm is to make parents a part of the learning process and give them tools with which to engage. Of course, this needs to take into account that parents come from various backgrounds and educational levels. Again, let us think through a use case. Continuing with the same example, what if the parents of the kids were part of the process of getting these teams ready to compete? What can they do to help the kids practice and improve? I'm sure tremendous amounts of creativity can be injected into building playful models of collaboration and competition that makes learning fun and engaging for these kids. Some of these models have already been explored. Others would need to be. In summary, remote learning and teacher-assisted homeschooling would need to become part of routine K-12 pedagogy going forward. The pandemic will end one day, but some of these paradigms may last if these experiments become successful. I'm particularly keen to see the impact of engineering organic friendships into study groups. Similarly, I'm keen to see what deliberate parent involvement does to learning outcomes. Beyond the product design, we also need to consider the go-to-market strategy for such products. Today, it is generally understood amongst EdTech investors that the best kinds of businesses are those that find viral adoption via online teacher communities. Teachers are highly engaged, influential members of the K-12 ecosystem. They drive adoption of new technologies decisively. They make parents and schools pay for new technology. They exchange notes with other teachers and are highly influential viral spreaders of new products. So rather than selling school by school, the most successful products find their champions in communities of teachers. What about the numbers? Let us say an Algebra 1 app led by the teachers in charge finds adoption in 1,000 classrooms of 30 students each. That's 30,000 units, say at $10 per install. If the product succeeds, these 1,000 teachers would virally get it to 10,000, which puts the revenue at $3 million from the app. Once the product takes hold in a classroom, it would likely be used year after year. There are about 3 million students per year who are in the target market, so the TAM for the app is 30 million ARR. Now, once the paradigm has been established as successful, all other relevant math subjects would fit into the same framework. With 10 such apps, we're looking at a TAM of 300 million. With 100 such apps that go beyond math and traverse middle school and high school, we're looking at a 3 billion TAM for the US alone. Thus, this is a unicorn idea that can attract venture capital. However, you need to establish with one app the validity and the success of a methodology, of a new methodology. And before you can raise serious money, you need to show that teachers are willing to get behind it. So some level of bootstrapping would be required before you can raise financing. Nonetheless, in the post-COVID world, a new learning paradigm needs to emerge. If you come up with such a paradigm, you can build a kick-ass ed tech company for the post-COVID world. Let's see, what do you think?
So there's so much good in your proposal, and so let me start with the things that I really love and like, and then I'll raise a couple of questions that I think are maybe relevant. As you could tell from the previous conversation, number one, I absolutely agree with you that we haven't built technologies that really are about supporting collaboration. And I've always felt that unless learning is fun and joyful, you really don't get much out of it. So I love the core concept, which is how do we find a way to support groups? How do we find a way to sort of naturally bring fun into the learning opportunities? And so your core approach I love. As a footnote, I'd love to point out that I'd love to point out Discord. So you're probably familiar with Discord. It's sort of like a mashup of Zoom plus Slack for the gaming world, where students naturally go and really spend a lot of time. And they collaborate, they build projects together. I think it's a really good example for what we could see going forward. So your core prospect, I think, is incredibly valuable. I'm going to raise two questions that I think are at the on some of the other elements. Number one is, where should you try to spur adoption of said product? Right now, teachers are totally overwhelmed, number one. Number two is and their schools are grappling with a lot of the privacy issues that are inherent when everybody just sort of is jumping online and so forth. So yes, in a perfect world, teachers should be the ones who are really adopting and championing this. But as you pointed out, parents have a big role as well. Mm-hmm. I think that we're going to see viral adoption by families of some technologies that then may work their way into schools. So rather than starting with the teachers, who quite frankly have way more on their plates than any human being should have, I would really rather see a go-to-market strategy that involves how do you naturally get students and their parents really engaged in something. So I would argue for that. Second thing is on the cost. Frankly, $10 per install is way too expensive. Remember that if you're talking about an individual app for something like algebra, a school is simply not going to have the funding to be able to buy a $10 app for algebra, for English, for history, for social studies. It's way too expensive. Quite frankly, it's almost an order of magnitude too expensive. So think about what would it take if your initial, essentially revenue was almost $1 a person, and then how do you kind of build up from there? The $10 is frankly more than the schools are going to be able to afford. So on the other hand, you could argue that if what I said to you is, hey, this is about the parents, you're going to find that there's a group of parents who have the ability to pay. And so therefore, where you wind up in that dollar, between $1 and $10, will depend on who your initial customers are, right, and therefore what their pocketbooks can support. So, so those are my two critiques of your otherwise, I think, very fine idea. And I, for one, would love to see some of these technologies emerge, and would really expect to see them emerge in the coming years.
Well, the other point that I want to underscore is the notion of friendships. I had a group of 6 friends since I was 12 years old, I think, about 11 or 12 years old. And the first of these friends I actually met when I was 7 in 2nd grade, and then another one I met in 4th grade. So we all came together, the 6 of us, and several of these I'm still very close friends with. So I think the friendships you form at the very beginning of your life, and the early, really formative years, are very valuable. And I think this online world, instead of trying to operate in the broadcast mode where, you have to wear nice clothes, get photographed looking like a, poster of Vogue or something, and that's not the way to groom these children. The way to groom these children is to give them healthy ways of establishing healthy relationships that will last a lifetime. So that was part of my thinking in kind of designing a platform that not only teaches but also has a real social value creation.
Yeah. Well, again, I would recommend, if you have not spent any time on Discord, I would highly recommend that anyone who's thinking of going into this world spend some time on Discord. It's a pretty interesting case study of a company. It actually was started, I think, around 2010, 2011. It's growing very, very rapidly, and it, again, was its initial intended use case, and its primary use case is to serve the gaming community, the online gaming community. But quite frankly, in our family, we have now 2 boys who are located in geographically different places. That's the platform that we use to chat with them every Sunday. And so, interesting combination of, as I said, I think of it as a mashup between Slack and Zoom, but a lot more fun, and it's certainly an environment that a lot of young people are pretty riveted by.
Very good. So both to you, Betsy, and to the audience, I want to also give you a pointer to another of these post-COVID startup ideas that also deals with the same kind of, small group friendships. We have one around called Meaningful Friendships through literature and film. Take a look at that. It's a really fun idea, and we've had a discussion last week at the roundtable with a panel on that topic. Okay, well, Betsy, it was great catching up. I would like to catch up offline, one-on-one to learn what you're doing next. So I'm not asking you that on camera, but I will ask you that in person.
Okay. We'll save that for an in-person conversation, which I will very much look forward to. Thank you so much again. So impressed with everything that you've done with this group, and so impressed with, really the way that you lead, the role model that you create, and then obviously all of the great information that you're sharing.
And likewise, I'm very impressed with what you've done with EdSurge. It was a great post-Forbes move to do something really meaningful. I know you were looking for that kind of meaning, so congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. I hope you enjoyed listening to that piece of analysis of an idea my idea that Betsy, with her insights into the edtech world, critiqued. And so it was, it was a very insightful perspective. I will add one thing to what we discussed, what you heard us discussing there as additional commentary. When you are positioning a product, you can choose to position a more. So Betsy pointed out that the pricing model that I suggested of $10 per app for download is too high. It's too high for public schools, yes. It's not necessarily too high for parents who are right now creating these social pods, education pods, and so on. And that movement has really taken off. So parents are very involved. And if you look at the affluent parents, there is a market for high-end apps. And if you call this a higher end price point in that spectrum, there is definitely a segment of population that can afford. And you could, so in many ways, I think what we discussed here are two segments. There could be a platform and a go-to-market strategy that is focused on public schools, and there is another one at a lower price point, and then there is another one that could be, quote unquote, a bit of a luxury product for affluent parents who are very willing to pay. For them, paying $100, $200 worth of apps to, teach their kids properly is not a problem, and they would put that on high priority. And there is definitely a section of affluent parents who would be able to take that idea and turn it into, you could take that segment and turn it into an interesting business there. So I think the thing that you need to think about if you're going in this direction also is the technology element of it. We're talking about quite significant technological pieces and building blocks. One of the assumptions I made as I was writing about this idea is that it would use Zoom or equivalent as the communication platform. You're going to need to see how to architect a product like this that uses a video conferencing system, whatever other kind of gamifications or social media communication that you need. So my guidance would be that you do need a reasonable technologist on your team. So when you are working on these ideas, and we talked about this last week also when we were discussing the literature idea, and I had a panel of people talking about that literature idea as well and brainstorming and kicking that around. If you want to build something significant like this, you need variety of skill sets and domain expertise on your team. So there is the learning pedagogy element that you're going to need to have on your team. Then there's the technology element, which is sufficiently complicated that you need somebody on your team. So the founding team for something like this is unlikely to be viable for a solo entrepreneur. In prior sessions of the online rendezvous here, we have discussed solo entrepreneurship extensively. There are certain kinds of ideas that are perfectly fine for solo entrepreneurs. We've discussed these piggybacking on PaaS platforms and building, technology products on top of PaaS platforms that where you have domain knowledge. Those kinds of things are okay for solo entrepreneurs. But this idea that we talked about is a much bigger idea. And I think it would be difficult to tackle for a solo entrepreneur. Those are my, comments on this particular topic, the edtech space, the platforms. The main criticism that I have of how we are trying to do edtech right now is that we're trying to do EdTech on Zoom, which was not built for education. So you need real custom platforms to be able to do, to do education in a proper collaborative environment, involving parents, involving teachers, involving kids, involving the friends of kids and study groups, etc. But I think that requires a platform reinvention of sorts, and how you're going to do that requires a technologist to step in, as well as somebody who can really deeply understand the psychology of teaching and psychology of education. So this is one, a big idea, two, a complex idea, and three, therefore, you need more of a team with different talents and skill sets and backgrounds to be able to pull something like this off. Okay, that is going to be our key programming for today. I am going to point you again to those of you who are trying to come and get feedback on your idea or on your project, on your business from me. Please go to 1mby1m.com, go to free public roundtables and register. And there you will find all the instructions, the schedules and everything. And I hope to see you in one of the upcoming sessions. We have one this week on Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and I hope to see you there. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming today. I hope you enjoyed the show.